Ms. Diener.
Oh, Diener, it's the female prosecutor. She gave the opening.
If you can't feel safe in your own home, where can we feel safe?
Oh, that's a objection right there.
Think about your house.
That's a golden rule violation.
It's where you go to retreat, to get away from the world. It's where we grow up. It's where we have kids. It's where we mark on the inside of a doorway, and they've gotten taller and taller.
Pure emotion.
It's where we make memories.
Ugh, golden rule violation all over the
That's
place.
why it's so sacred. That's why it's so important. How many of us during the Thanksgiving holiday were in our own kitchens celebrating with our family? Christmas, right now, how many of us right now have a Christmas tree?
How is this allowed?
Why do we do that? Why do we put Christmas lights outside our house? Why do we decorate our homes?
This has got nothing to do with the law.
Because they're ours, right? Because they're so important. And today, that's exactly why this day is so important.
You got to convict this guy because of Christmas lights?
Because the sanctity, the safety of our homes has been compromised.
This is terrible. This is so improper.
He took her away. 28 years old. The rest of her life at the hands of this defendant. The Fort Worth Police Department has good officers. In fact, I've worked with some of the best officers in the state.
Vouching.
My career. I trust them.
Oh,
Trust them with my family. They actually do serve and protect. They don't have preconceived notions about the East Side. They don't go to certain parts of town and say some deserve to be served and protected, but not others.
None of this is evidence.
this is all improper
Only the
argument.
good parts.
This is improper.
Only the parts of town that I want to go to. That's not how it works here. Because our community is all of us.
Appeals
And it
to
was her
community.
too. And despite what he thought, when he went over to that house, it wasn't a dope deal gone bad, a robbery or a shooting, high crime area. This is a 28-year-old woman that was a daughter, a sister, an aunt,
Facts, not in evidence.
studying to be a doctor, taking care of her nephew. Yolanda, her mom, was a good person.
Oh,
Zion
No.
was a good person. James Smith still lives on the east side. He's a good person. His family are good people. When you put on that badge and you put on that uniform, you say you're going to serve and protect us all. That means her too. And the Fort Worth Police Department, those officers that do serve and protect us and don't have those preconceived notions, that did a thorough investigation in this case, are ashamed that they ever called somebody like him a brother in blue.
Objection.
Because it means something when you put on a badge. It means you don't go to a house with a preconceived notion because you want to have that kind of power. Haven't we all met an officer that just likes being an officer a little too much? I've been pulled over by those guys before.
So
Power hungry, tunnel vision. It's a little scary to me. Those people that we
I
don't.
object to that being outside the record and an expression of the prosecutor's personal opinion, which is
Thank you.
absolutely irrelevant to this jury.
Thank you.
Stay within the record. Ask the
Thank
judge,
you.
ask you to instruct the jury to disregard the last comments of counsel.
jury will disregard the last argument.
And throughout the course of their entire investigation, what did the Fort Worth Police Department determine? They talked to all of these witnesses. They looked at all of the evidence in this case. What you guys got over the last 2 weeks, that's what they had.
And they charged him.
Forensic interview from Zion, witness interviews, they talked to folks, the autopsy report, the photographs, the body camera video, frame by frame by frame, just like what we watched. They went through all of that and they determined it's murder.
The
They
completely
issued an
inappropriate-
arrest
No, they
warrant.
didn't.
No, evading
And
the
a district
providence of the
judge
jury.
signed saying this is murder.
So improper.
The question in this
Terrible.
case has never been, is it murder?
What?
The question that they raised this week was, is it self-defense? Is it
Well, those are
self-defense?
opposite things.
And what's really important about the court's charge is this is the law that applies. We do not view it based on what he says and only what he says. A person doesn't get to harm another, get up on the stand and say, well, I was doing it in fear of my life. And we just let them go. We just take their word for it. Imagine that scenario. Imagine what would happen if that were the law. Then not one single person would ever be held responsible and accountable for what they do if they can just say it is, so it is.
No.
That's not the way that it works.
Yes, it is.
What the law is, and what you guys have in front of you, is that it has to be a reasonable belief and immediately necessary. And so how do we define what's reasonable, right? That's also in your court charge. It's a belief that would be held by an ordinary and prudent person. All of you guys, with what he did out there, was that reasonable? Was that immediately necessary? And here's one very important part, and I can tell you right now, when they get up and talk, they don't want you to focus on this. This is the law. This is what we're charged. This is what we're bound by.
Taking the instruction out of context.
Unlawful deadly force.
And she's disparaging the defendant.
Unlawful force. The only way that this conduct is justified by this defendant is if it's reasonable to all of you, what he did, immediately necessary. And the most important part is her, meaning Tatiana's, unlawful force towards him.
No, that's a
Or
burdenship.
unlawful deadly force. The only way he
No.
is justified in his
Nope.
conduct
They have to disprove.
is that it's to the degree the actor reasonably believes the deadly force is immediately necessary to protect the actor being the defendant, against the other person, a Tatiana's use of unlawful deadly force. So think about that for a minute. What has been unlawful about what a Tatiana did? We have not seen one shred of evidence that anything that a Tatiana did was unlawful.
No.
In fact, we heard quite the opposite. You can be in your own home, owning a weapon, owning a gun, and you can protect yourself in your home. That's one of the most fundamental rights. That's the reason we all feel so safe. A Tatiana Jefferson didn't commit any criminal act by walking up to the window with her gun,
Not necessary.
thinking someone was outside. It's what many of us would do if we were in our house in the middle of the night in the
Golden
back
rule.
bedroom and we hear somebody outside. That's what you would expect us to do, to try to protect ourselves, and in this case, Zion as well. So there's not been any evidence to support anything that she did was unlawful.
Well, this is a
You gotta
problem
have
with
that.
instruction.
That's
I
what
put
the
in
law
private
says.
chat.
And if you think about it, it makes sense in this case because she was in her own home. If we can't feel safe there, where in the world are we going to feel safe? This defendant, when he put on this uniform, he has a tremendous amount of power, right? A tremendous amount of power. And when we talk about what's reasonable, when I talked earlier about the Fort Worth Police Department, when they went through and they did their thorough investigation of what happened out there, they considered all of what you guys have seen as well as the general orders. I put that in here too. You guys can ask for that. If you guys want to go through, you can ask for the general orders. You can see exactly what they say. It's not about what I say they say, or they say, or any kind of spin that the defendant wants to put on it when he took the stand. It's exactly what is written down. It's the very thing that the defense said in opening statement. They followed all the steps and procedures as you are supposed to. An open structure is a silent alarm, and he did everything right. That is what this Jay Coons got up here and said. He wouldn't agree with anything that we asked him, but that's the one thing he said. Everything he did was right. Well, that is not the case. Very first thing, officer receiving the call, that's him, right? He's the sheet officer. He's the main officer. He calls the shots. Step 2, B, all main exit ways should be guarded so as to prevent the escape of any defender. We start there and we fail, right? And that was one amongst the many things that he did wrong, because it wasn't important to him to serve and protect that day. It was important for him to get there, get in the action. Power. It can corrupt certain people. Certain people don't need to wear a badge. Certain people do not need to have the power and the control if they do not respect the accountability. And in this case, the
These were all mouth
grave
noises.
effect that it had. Now, you guys have the ability today, over 3.5 years, we've waited. They've waited.
No, appeal to
They
sympathy.
waited.
Nope, wrong. Improper closing argument right here.
Everybody in this room and all the rooms outside of this room and everybody in this community has waited for today. Because
Appeal to
today
sympathy.
you
Appeal to
say you
justice.
can't create the danger and then claim self-defense.
Objection, disparaging defense.
We want to
Does
feel
not
safe
burden shift.
in our own home. Today, you guys' decision in this case, finding him guilty, says, I'm holding you responsible. I'm holding you accountable. I'm following the law. And
No.
the power you all have today, which is more power today to change lives, to hold people accountable than most people have in a lifetime.
No.
The
Improper
power
argument.
you guys have today is to hold him responsible. It's to tell them
No.
that it all wasn't in vain.
No. These are such
It's to say
improper
that
arguments.
she
Objection.
matters.
No.
They matter. East Side matters. We protect everyone.
What is it?
This is
And the law
terrible.
agrees.
No, it does
Everything
not.
in this case, all of the evidence in this case is demanding a guilty verdict. That is exactly what we are asking for from all of you today. We know what he does with power. What are you guys going to do with it?
Oh,
You find him
Sick.
guilty.
sick.
She didn't even say guilty of which charge. General guilt.
Yes.
That was terrible.
That was sick. There was so much wrong with that closing, and they didn't object, but they objected once. What is the defense doing?
As she's dying in front of him, he doesn't lean over and give her aid. He doesn't comfort her in any way. He doesn't try and stop the bleeding. He looks down between her legs,
What?
kicks something, and says, "See what looks like a weapon here."
And it was.
Not, there's the gun.
Oh, good.
Not-
He's whispering now.
Not, here's the gun.
Don't get
Not, Darts, we've got the gun.
It's a
Looks
trap.
like we have a weapon here.
Ugh.
And that
Whatever,
sigh
whatever
you
is
hear
said is wrong.
that the
whatever
defense's
is done is
expert
wrong.
tried to say was a sigh of relief, was a sigh that he just got of danger. No, that was a sigh of relief. Looks like we have a weapon here. That is not a declaration of a person that was sure of what they saw. Because he didn't know when he pulled that trigger. Looks like we have a weapon here.
Go ahead. Make my day.
That's how you know that self-defense doesn't apply to this case. That's how you know that we have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was not acting in self-defense because Tatiana was not acting unlawfully. She would have to be acting unlawfully for the
No,
defendant to get the benefit of self-defense.
it's a misstatement of law.
And again, what is unlawful
Who cares? The judge is letting everything go today.
in protecting your home? Even
Maybe he's
the
scared of
defense's
being
own
screamed
witnesses
at. I
all
don't know.
agree. What she did was not unreasonable.
If he gets convicted, it's on this.
And again, you'll never see it in the court's charge. You can look through every page. It's not from what the defendant sees. It's from what a reasonable, prudent person sees in the same circumstances.
As a
And
defendant.
I tell you right now, no reasonable and prudent Fort Worth officer
We're starting
would have
again.
gone hard charging, gung-ho, past those two doors, into that backyard, creating a situation of danger for not only himself, his partner, and anyone in that home. Because he's the one that made the decisions on October 12th, 2019. He's the one that ended Tatiana Jefferson's life, and he's the reason that we are here. This is a matter of accountability. Tragedy,
It's so inappropriate.
an accident,
No,
that's spilling
wrong.
your milk at breakfast.
Objection.
This is murder. Someone lost her life.
So
Tatiana,
inappropriate.
Someone lost her life, so
No,
it must
That
be
doesn't make it
murder.
murder.
through no fault of her own.
Well, he's yelling,
And
so
now
it
you're going to
must.
decide if someone's going to be held accountable or not. And you're
Stop
going to have to look
behind
deep
him,
inside
whisper. I
and
can't
look
do
at
it.
this evidence. And
But
you
what about the
know,
rights of that little
He
girl?
never saw that gun. He didn't know what he saw. He was hard charging. He was gung ho. He finally got some action.
Those aren't crimes.
Getting some action
He was
shouldn't be
going
a
to pull his
crime.
weapon. And because of that, Tatiana will never breathe again. Because of that, Zion no longer has an aunt. Because of that, two sisters and a brother no longer have a sister. And that's not okay. So go back there and do what you know is right and find the defendant guilty.
Mr.
He's an
Smith,
anti-Zionist.
before I excuse the jury, would you remove the exhibits from the record?
Yes, Your Honor.
Get the fuck out of here.
Hey, can you go get your crap you left there? Thanks.
Now I'm wondering if this is an actual judge. So again, folks, I think if this defendant gets convicted, it's on this. It's where the prosecutor's arguing that it had to have been, the victim had to have been committing an unlawful act in order for the officer's use of force in self-defense to be lawful. That's not correct. What's correct is that the officer had to have a reasonable belief that she was committing an unlawful act. He believed there was a burglary in progress. A burglar's coming, both genders, folks. He also knows that he's wearing a uniform. It doesn't matter whether or not she actually saw him wearing a uniform. If he had a reasonable belief that she would have perceived him as an officer and she's about to shoot him, that would reinforce his reasonable perception that she's a burglar acting unlawfully. It's not necessary that she actually be acting unlawfully. It's only necessary that he reasonably believes that the force about to be used against him is unlawful. That's it. Lots of inappropriate stuff here. Steve kept mentioning the golden rule issue. You want to speak to that, Steve?
Sure. The golden rule is, how would you feel if? So putting yourself in the position of the victim, that is an improper, it's called a golden rule violation. And the prosecutor started with it. And there was no objection. That is absolutely objectionable. That is not the standard. And that is an improper closing argument. There were so many. The first closing, the first 15 minutes was almost nothing but objectionable closing. It was everything that a prosecutor should not do, and there was no objection. And I really think the judge should have stepped in and shut it down. I mean, we had a case. What's the name of the case?
And the reason the golden rule is inappropriate, universally condemned, is because the jury is supposed to be acting impartially in coming to a verdict. And the golden rule argument destroys that impartiality because they're being asked to put themselves in the position of the victim, acting out of partiality now. You don't have an impartial jury anymore.
Right. And there was many things. There were burden shifts. There was appeal to community conscience. There was disparaging the defense. And I'm talking about the disparaging of the self-defense, the right of self-defense. There was a disparagement, like they're just trying to get away with murder. That's a disparaging of the defenses of right of justifiable use of force. There were so many errors in that. That is a textbook improper closing argument by prosecutors. Sadly, this is common. And that's the frightening thing that people don't realize is that I think that this is a betrayal of the prosecutor's duty to follow the law. They are not following the law when they make this kind of argument. And in fact, in my second edition, there is the added chapter in this second edition is on prosecutorial closing arguments. And that there is a step-by-step guide on how a prosecutor should conduct their closing arguments. And then there's another part about all the reasons that closing arguments get overruled and get cases get overturned on appeal based on improper closing arguments. And that 15-minute opening was filled with improper closings. And the defense objected once. I'm disappointed in the defense, and the prosecutor betrayed themselves. If there's a conviction here, I don't believe that the law is followed. Now, the prosecutor to me was completely unlikable, but I don't know how he'll play they will play in front of a jury there. But go ahead. What do y'all say? I'm still fuming at that prosecutorial closing.
I have a quick question. So you deal with appeals quite a bit, and where the defense is not objecting, what is retained for appeal? Like, what would this be an appealable issue?
Well, and I'm Florida, not Texas. We have a case that's similar to this in that it was chock full of improper closing arguments that was reversed on fundamental error grounds. It was a murder trial, and the defense did not object, and the state was doing all kinds of. And so there is a possibility that if there's a conviction, there is a grounds for appeal, but it makes it much, much harder for the appellate attorney because the standard has to be fundamental error. And I don't know. I think it was fundamental error. In our case, that the fifth DCA came back, reversed the case, and said the judge should have stepped in because it was so bad. And I think that is this case.